Well, I was reviewing, as in the reference in the title to this recording, the conflict between Paul's injunction to obey authorities over you, worldly authorities, and the tension of the Christian tension of obeying God. The fundamental problem arises, intractability of the problem actually arises from the incoherence of the question. The problem itself. Christianity has become obedience to God. It was never meant to be that. The Jesus way is love of God. It's not obedience. It's love. There's no conflict between obedience and love. Let me see if I can validate the statement in reasoning for you and me. It's true that if there were complete compliance to Paul's statement, obeying authorities, then there would be no martyrs, because you would be responding to the pressures on you to obey. And you don't get martyred for obeying, you get martyred for disobeying. Well, unless there's some confusion and mistake going on. But as I think you've probably gathered by now, sacrifice is not what we put upon our children. We don't wish them to be martyred. We don't wish them to be crucified, etc., etc. And that makes Paul's injunction rather clearer. No, we're to obey authorities put over us. You'll notice he doesn't contrast it with and not obey God. So whether he's mentioned what about your relationship to God in this respect or not, we come into it with the Jesus story, which Paul doesn't seem to have.
Doesn't quote Jesus, as I've pointed out in the past.
And that is that our relationship with the state might be obedience, but our relationship with God is love. Love is a case of the heart, not the actions. The heart steers the actions where the actions are possible. Circumstances may not be there for me to rescue you, so I can't do it. But my heart longs to rescue you. It's not the record of your actions that's going to get you into heaven, so to speak. The gates of heaven open to the desires of your heart when they are in harmony with the values of heaven. If you're not obedient to the state, as we've said in the referred to recording, you don't have the advantages of civilization, and that's sheer hell. I mean, civilization is not always too good, but no civilization is an absolute nightmare. You're reduced to the ghastly state that the wildlife around you in the garden, well, in your garden, not Garden of Eden, perhaps, I hope. In nature, it's a nightmare. There's no civilization. Although various animal groups do have attempts at such, don't they? And that's rather wonderful, where they care for each other and so on. And most creatures that we think of strive to care for their young at least, if not their partner as well. So the reality is you can obey authority. the necessities of the economic system. There are other necessities of my physical existence in this world. If I'm to walk across the field, I will kill things, whether I wish to or not. My heart doesn't want to. I deliberately don't step on creatures if I see them. In fact, I tend to avoid stepping on flowers. I feel it's such a shame to step on a flower, even if it is a wild flower, a daisy or a dandelion. I don't want it destroyed. You see, it says something of my desires. Coming back to what I said, it's my desires that, if you like, qualify me for heaven. My desire to love God and all that he is as I understand him. And life eternal is to know, to have good understanding of him. This is life eternal, to know thee, the only true God. And I'm trusting my God to lead me that way. And of course, the reality is that the true God will lead me that way, because that's what he wants, as I understand it. He loves us, because that's what I've taken my understanding to be foundational upon. Seemed a good idea. It appealed to me. Probably because I've experienced being brought up in some sort of family. May not have had a perfect dad, but I've got some idea of what he might be. And I'm trusting my God to reveal to me what he is. But to come to the point here, it's not my track record. It's my current state of desire and wanting, what I currently value. And the more I may, run this concentration camp, or this prison, or this psychiatric hospital, the more I may loathe what I'm being forced to do. Well, that's very good. You'll love it when you get to heaven. And there's no way you want to return to this sort of thing again. You're being blessed. Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? What do you think of that? Let me just pause a second.
Hey, I think it's Naaman who, in the Old Testament, somewhere in there, you could look it up. I might manage to give you the reference at the end of this. But he gets healed of leprosy, but he says to the prophet, he says, look, I have to go in with my king to his worship. Will you excuse me if I bow to his God? Obviously, my whole way of life's going to end if I don't. And the prophet says yes, and lets him go on his way. He recognizes, he's not going to be living in Israel. He's going to be living in his own country, which I gather is Babylon or something as bad, And he's going to have to obey, or he's going to be, that's the end of living. And you're not meant to end living. You're here to experience living in the universe of good and evil, not to get chucked out immediately, killed, dispensed with. So that's rather good. Let me check the reference a minute. Yep. Yes, the reference seems to be 2 Kings 5, 17 or 18. Have a look. Yes, 17 and 18. Well, you may say, of course, from a biblical point of view, if you worship Scripture, that that's only one reference, and there should be loads if it's that clear, Fair enough. But at least to say it's not without precedent in the scripture, since that's what's so important to people. You could say that he that doeth sin is the servant of sin, and I think that might be James, I'm not sure, somewhere. I think I could reply, yes, but we are sent. And in the story, Jesus was sent into the world, takes on the position of finite body and the constraints of the evil. He thirsts, he hungers, he needs a band of men around him to protect him when he wishes to be protected, and so on and so forth. If you think he's the fullness of God on earth, well, I think you're struggling with an oxymoron, that to be on earth is not to have the fullness of God in heaven. Miracles as and when needed from the point of view of the ministry, but otherwise acting as man as example to man. I need to know how to act as a man to be right with God, namely to be loving God, given I am at present a man, not God already. When I can fly, I will fly, but at the minute I can't. And it's best to live accordingly, or you don't live very long. And you are meant to live. I am come that you might have life, not immediately give yourself as sacrifice and exit from this universe. You are here to learn and experience being here, not leave. You will follow your incredible drive for self-preservation, of remaining here. And yes, there will be some that martyr themselves, and Jesus did, but that doesn't mean to say you're supposed to do that. Jesus was ready to return to heaven. You might not be quite yet, and there may be other lessons that you need to know, or some better and stronger, before you leave. That's why you're here. It's not that suicide, martyrdom, is not an option. It's that it's not the best option. Usually. There may be exceptions. And one might be if you're going to be tortured to death or suffer in great pain before death, it might be the case that it's best to go now. I'm not certain of that, but I do think so. To deny suicide to the person who wishes to do it, well, quite simply may be very unkind. If I see this creature suffering, and I'm pretty sure it's going to die in the end, then compassion might drive me to bring that end sooner. Sooner the better. And so I would kill the creature as humanely as possible, by which I mean with the minimum amount of pain and suffering. And of course to achieve the minimum of pain and suffering. That does not mean you should commit suicide in the wrong circumstances, or kill in the wrong circumstances generally, obviously. Thank you, Dad.